Maciej Doksa w kujawsko-pomorskiej e-Szkole w studiu. Panie Macieju, delikatne spóźnienie, ale nic się nie stało. Nie będziemy szukać winnego przecież.
Oczywiście, delikatne spóźnienie, ale za to teraz zaczniemy lekcję z energią.
Zapraszamy.
Good afternoon. So, as I have said, we are going to talk about energy today. Energy is extremely important. Energy is part of our everyday life. We wouldn't be able actually to survive, to function today without energy in one way or another. So today we are going to talk about different sources of energy, the good energy, the not so good energy, and what we can do to get more energy, to save energy. So generally everything about energy. Well, maybe almost everything. All right, so what are the types of energy? Well, basically nowadays we can divide energy into two kinds. First of all, this is the energy which we get from the renewable sources. What does it mean? Renewable sources of energy. Well, these are sources which you can renew, or they renew themselves again and again and again and again, so you can never run out of them. So renewable sources of energy, in Polish it means odnawialne źródła energii. This is a very trendy term nowadays. Everybody is talking about this. If you just walk around, if you drive around and you look at the houses on the roofs, you can see solar panels installed. When you drive out of town, you can see the wind turbines in the fields. So renewable sources of energy are becoming more and more common, more and more popular. So what are the renewable sources of energy? There are four main sources of renewable sources of energy. First of all, solar power. So this is the power from the sun. In our time scale, we can say that there will always be sun. Of course, this is not totally true, because sun is going to also to run out of energy in some time in the future, but this is like, you know, billions of years ahead of us. So in our time scale, in the time scale of human civilization, we could easily say that there will always be sun. Just give me a second. I need to just correct something on the screen. Yeah, all right, to get back our screen. So solar power, as I said, is the energy from the sun. How do we get this energy? How do we use this energy? Well, basically we install something that we call photovoltaic cells or solar panels. We are going to talk about it in a moment in closer detail. The next type of renewable energy is wind power, so the energy from the wind. You have seen the wind turbines, which are used to generate power from the wind. The next type of energy is hydropower, so power that we get from the force of flowing water. So this is usually done on the rivers where the water is flowing, and you know, when something is moving, for example, when the water is flowing, it generates energy, or it carries energy with it. And the last type of renewable source of energy is a biomass. So basically it's either burning some plants to get energy, or it could also mean transforming some plants into fuel, or it could also mean getting gas from fermentation of some biomass. All right, and the second big type of energy is energy that we get from fossil fuels. What are fossil fuels? First of all, what are fossils? Well, fossils basically are things that were created billions of years ago, and they, with time, they have turned into, well, other substances. I would like to say into stone, but not all of it has actually turned into stone. To są skamieniałości, skamieliny, fossils. Fossil fuels, po polsku mówimy na to paliwa kopalne. Oczywiście nie mówimy paliwa skamieniałe, no bo one oprócz węgla nie są skamieniałe de facto. Mówimy na nie paliwa kopalne, po angielsku fossil fuels. And there are basically three types of fossil fuels. Coal, czyli węgiel, natural gas, czyli gaz, dosłownie gaz ziemny, and crude oil, czyli ropa naftowa. Na ropę naftową bardzo często po prostu mówi się oil, ale dokładny termin ropy takiej nieprzetworzonej to jest crude oil. So these are the three main fossil fuels that we use to generate energy to power cars and other machines. And there is one more type of energy that we create. It's the nuclear energy, nuclear power, nuclear energy. This is energy that we create in the reaction of nuclear fusion, and we create energy in this way. Is it renewable source of energy? Well, not quite, because we use some resources. I mean resources, czyli surowce. Basically we have to use some radioactive substances, radioactive elements like plutonium, uranium, or other radioactive elements, and of course they can run out. However, we use so little of them compared to the fossil fuels that they are not likely to run out in a foreseeable future. So it's not quite renewable, but to a large extent we could say that it's almost renewable, but it's not. Okay, it's not of course it's not fossil fuels. It's not based on fossil fuels because these radioactive elements are not considered fossil fuels. They are just, you know, resources which are in the ground, but they're not fossil fuels. All right, so let's take a look at the particular types of energy that we create. Let's see what is connected with them. Let's see what are the advantages and disadvantages of those sources of energy. So first of all, solar energy. As I said, we generate electric power, electricity, by using photovoltaic cells. Cells should be with a double L. Photovoltaic cells, czyli tak zwane ogniwa fotowoltaiczne. Well, the common popular name that we use, the common term is just solar panels. Yes, we commonly call it solar panels. So these are those special devices that turn the photo energy of the sun into the electrical power. And of course you can have it installed on the roof of your house or in your garden, but they are also used on a larger scales as in some kind of, you know, solar power plants, and they are usually called solar farms, czyli tak zwane farmy solarne. All right, so solar energy, is it good energy or bad energy? Of course, it is renewable source of energy, so it's good, extremely good. That's why it's becoming more and more popular. So what are the advantages of solar energy? Well, as I said, first of all, it's renewable. Yes? So there is always sun of course, during the day. There will always be sun, as I said, in our time scale. It is clean energy. So when we generate power in this way, we don't really create any pollution. There is no air pollution, there is no water pollution when we generate it. Of course, the production of solar panels creates some kind of energy, yes, because these are, artificial products which contain various chemicals. So the production of solar powers as an industry, it is of course not quite environmental friendly. There is some pollution, but when they are already produced and when they generate energy, this process is not connected with any pollution. It is also relatively cheap energy. Why? Well, because when you produce it, you don't have to pay for the sun, really. Of course, you have to pay for the solar panels, yes, so they are quite expensive to produce and to install, so it's not like completely free, but you make this one-time investment and then the production of energy is actually cheap. As I said, it doesn't cause any pollution. It is also easy to install on a small scale, which means almost everybody who has a house or garden, some piece of land, can install them and start producing energy, which means this can be, popularized among common people, which is actually happening. You must have seen, as I said, you must have seen solar panels almost everywhere nowadays. It's becoming extremely popular. Are there any disadvantages of solar energy? Of course. It's not very efficient in winter. In winter we don't have a lot of sunshine. The day is short. Very often it's cloudy, so then it produces energy, but much less than in summertime. So this is the basic disadvantage. And as I have already said, it needs a relatively large investment. So the solar panels, cost quite a lot of money. Their installation of the infrastructure of the system costs quite a lot of money. But it will pay off in the long term. Yes? So if you use them for a couple of years, this initial investment is just paid back to you. All right, the next type of energy is energy from the wind, so the wind powers. It is, as I said, generated by so-called wind turbines, czyli tak zwane potocznie wiatraki, turbiny wiatrowe, wind turbines. And very often wind turbines are collected into wind farms. So you have, for example, 10 or 20 or 30 wind turbines together as like one system in one place. We call it a wind farm, czyli po prostu farma wiatrowa. And there are basically two types of wind farms. There are wind farms on land, which you can see when you drive through the countryside, because they are always in the countryside, and offshore, which means they are at sea, installed at sea, not far from the shore, from the beach, from the shore, and then they can be bigger because, in this place there isn't any other infrastructure, people don't live there, so you can build bigger ones. So, what are the advantages of wind power? Of course, it's a renewable source of energy, so there is always wind. Well, there will always be wind, yes. It is clean energy, it's environmentally friendly, it doesn't cause any pollution. Of course, again, the production of the wind turbine can, because it's an industrial process, so it will probably create some kind of pollution, but energy generation doesn't really create any pollution. Energy, again, it's cheap. There is a huge initial investment, because you can imagine such huge structure as wind turbine costs a lot of money to build, to install, to also to maintain, but energy generation is actually almost for free. You don't have to pay for the wind. It is mostly environmentally friendly, however, there are some disadvantages. So let's talk about disadvantages. The main disadvantage of wind power is that it is a very unpredictable power supply. What does it mean? Unpredictable, it means that you cannot predict it. Why? Well, because sometimes there is wind, sometimes there is no wind, sometimes there is a lot of wind, it's very windy, sometimes there is only some light wind, some breeze, so you never actually know and you can't control how strong the wind will be and how much energy will be produced, which means you don't really know when a wind turbine or wind farm will produce how much energy, which can be a little bit of a problem, because with energy, you know, you have to be able to control the production of energy. You have to know how much energy you are going to produce, you can produce, and when you need more energy, you just have to supply more energy. With wind farms, with wind power, you never notice. However, in combination with other sources of energy, you can still have some control on the general energy production process. So as I said, it's unpredictable, it generates energy only when the wind blows. Again, it's a huge investment. Yes, it costs a lot to install a wind turbine. It requires a lot of space. That's why you don't see wind turbines in the city, because there isn't enough space in the city. It could also be dangerous for the planes, which often fly over the city because they land and take off from, you know, airfields. So you have to have it in the countryside, and in the countryside, usually in the fields, far away from houses. Why? Well, because they, first of all, they can cause some noise. They are moving, you know, so they could be dangerous if they were close to some human habitation. They can be dangerous for birds. They can hit birds, flying birds, because they move. They also disrupt, you know, the flying paths of some birds. So for the birds, probably it's not the best solution. And some people claim that wind turbines spoil the landscape. So some people say they are ugly and they don't look good and they just, yeah, spoil the landscape, czyli psują krajobraz. All right, let's go on to the hydropower, so power generated from the flowing water. A place where you generate power from the flowing water, it's called hydropower plant, and they generate, as I said, energy from the flowing water, yes, because the flowing water will move the generator and in this way will create electricity. This is usually connected with a dam. Dam to jest tama, so a place where you can control the flow of water, and in this way you can also control how much energy is produced. So what are the advantages of hydropower? Of course, it's renewable, because if you have flowing water, well, it will basically flow there all the time, yes? Of course, it can change in the future, but in most cases, if we have a river, the river stays there. It is clean energy because it doesn't really create any pollution. It is cheap energy to generate because water flows for free. You don't have to pay for flowing water. However, again, the investment is huge. It is predictable in most cases, most of the time, because most of the time the river flows more or less in the same way. So you can control the production of energy. I said most of the time, not always. It is also easier to install on a small scale. So, you know, people who live by the river and who have some access to the river, they can build some small hydropower plants, takie małe elektrownie wodne. Of course, it's not for everybody. It's not as common as solar power because not everybody lives by the river, of course, yes, and can build such a hydropower plant. Okay, what are the disadvantages? Well, it can be only installed on a river. Yes, you can't really install it on a lake. The water must be moving, so there must be a river which is flowing, and the flow of water has to be just, enough, sufficient to generate power. It requires a dam, so you have to control the flow of water in some way. So usually it means you build a dam and you install this hydropower plant in the dam. It usually requires a huge investment, yes, especially huge hydroelectric power plants. You just have to spend really a lot of money to build such a thing. That's why, for example, in Poland we don't really have a lot of them, because it's a huge investment. And as I said, it cannot be used everywhere. In places where there are no rivers or very few rivers, or the rivers are quite unpredictable, it makes no sense to build it. All right, biomass energy, so energy created by biomass. It is usually produced from so-called energy crops, czyli uprawy takie właśnie energetyczne na biomasę. So, as I said, there are different ways of using biomass. You can produce biofuel from some plants. And already we are using this biofuel in our cars. Only small percentage, some little percentage of the fuel is produced from, biomass. You can also burn this biomass, and when you burn it, you just create energy. And you can also, theoretically, you can make and control some kind of fermentation process and create biogas from the biomass too. What are the advantages? Again, it's renewable because you can grow these crops every year. Yes, they just don't disappear. You don't use them up. They grow every year, so it is renewable. It causes less pollution than, for example, burning fossil fuels, but it creates some pollution because when you burn something, you always create some kind of air pollution. It is basically environmentally friendly because when you grow these plants, well, most of the time it's not connected with a lot of pollution, and it's easy to control because this is the process that the humans create, so you can control it, so you can control how much energy you produce. What are the disadvantages? Well, first of all, we have insufficient amounts of biomass. If you want to produce a lot of energy, you really have to use a lot of biomass, a lot of crops, plants, and we don't really have so much of them to satisfy our energy needs. So still, biomass is only a small percentage of all energy that we generate. So there is less energy output. So biomass basically creates, I think, less energy compared to fossil fuels. And as I said, we create less energy with it because simply we don't have enough biomass. Also, another problem is that if you grow energy crops, in this place you cannot grow food crops. So these energy crops can compete with food crops. So you have a dilemma. Should I grow food crops here, or should I grow energy crops, so crops for biomass here? If you start growing a lot of crops for biomass, the price of food can go up because then you produce less food. All right, so let's move on to the fossil fuels, to the energy created from fossil fuels. Coal energy, energy produced from coal. Coal, czyli węgiel. How do we get coal? We get coal from the coal mines. Coal mines, czyli kopalnie węgla. There are those traditional coal mines in which you basically dig large tunnels in the ground and you get this coal from very, very deep underground. And you also have something which is called open pit mines. Dosłownie open pit to jest tak jakby otwarty dół, czyli po polsku kopalnie odkrywkowe. So here you don't dig a tunnel in the ground, you basically dig a big hole from the top of the ground and you get this coal which is not so deep. All right, so what are the advantages of coal energy? First of all, it's predictable. I mean, you know how much coal you can produce, you know how much coal you can burn, so you know exactly how much energy you will produce, you can easily control it, you know, so it is the main advantage. But there are a lot of disadvantages of it. It's non-renewable, which means this coal that we still have in the ground in some time in the future is going to run out. So we will use it up. It is also not environmentally friendly. How do we generate energy from coal? Well, we burn it. If you burn it, you create pollution. And unfortunately, burning coal creates a lot of air pollution. Also, mining is not good for the environment. It can create some pollution too. It is dangerous for people who work there, for the miners. It can be dangerous also for people on the ground, on the surface of the ground. It can destroy the landscape, especially open pit mines. You know, open pit mines are huge. It's a huge pit, huge hole in the ground. So they can really destroy the environment, the landscape. They have a tendency to suck up all the water from the surrounding areas. Even in Poland, you have examples of this. It can also cause construction disasters on the surface of the ground because sometimes the ground just collapses, the tunnels collapse, and everything which is on top of the ground can also collapse. So if you go to Silesia, Śląsk, in Poland, sometimes you can see the effects of mining. All right, oil energy. So energy from crude oil. Crude oil, tak jak powiedziałem, to jest ropa naftowa, taka jaką się wydobywa. And of course we can process it, czyli przetworzyć, and transform it into products which we use, you know, to create energy. So we create petrol, czyli benzyna. In America, in the United States, they don't say petrol, they say gasoline or gas. It's the same thing as petrol, but they just have their own name. Czyli gasoline, gas w Stanach Zjednoczonych to jest gaz, zwłaszcza jeżeli mówi się o w kontekście samochodów, to wiadomo, że chodzi o benzynę. Ktoś zapyta, no dobrze, ale jak odróżnić teraz gaz jako benzynę od gaz jako gaz, bo w sumie też jest gaz. Za chwilę się o tym dowiecie. To powiem o tym za chwilę. Where is oil extracted from the ground? Usually on some huge places which are called oil fields, czyli pola naftowe. Or it can be extracted from under the seabed, czyli spod dna morskiego, and then you have to build oil rigs. What is an oil rig? Oil rig to jest platforma wiertnicza, platforma naftowa, so they are built at sea to get the oil from under the bottom of the sea. And nowadays in America and the United States we also get shale oil, to jest ropa z tak zwanych łupków. It's a different, I would say, type of geological structure and different type of process of getting it. So what are advantages of getting energy from oil? Again, it's easy to control because you more or less know how much oil you can get from the ground at some given point and how much of it you can use at a given moment. Yeah? So you can control this energy production. Of course, also oil is a material for the chemical industry. A lot of things, especially, you know, artificial products, plastics, they are made of oil, of the, you know, oil derivatives. So this is a very useful thing. What are the disadvantages of oil? First of all, it's extremely expensive, especially that there are a lot of taxes connected with it, so it's basically expensive. That's why, for example, we don't really burn oil to produce electrical energy. It's mostly used for, powering machines, cars, and so on and so on. It's difficult to get. It's difficult to find, it's difficult to get from underground. I think it's more difficult to find it than to get it from underground. It's extremely difficult to get it from under the seabed. You need extremely large investment, to find it, to get it, to build the oil rigs. It's very, very, finding oil and getting oil is extremely expensive. Only the biggest companies can really do this. And of course, burning oil, because it's fossil fuel, it causes pollution. Getting it from the ground, it can also cause pollution, but also burning it causes pollution. Because it's a fossil fuel, we burn it. The next thing is natural gas. I have already told you that in America, when you say benzyna, you say gas, gasoline or gas, but also this product that we in Poland or in Polish we call gas has the same name in America. So how to distinguish gas od benzyny? Well, basically this what we call gas in Polish, in English is called natural gas. Tak? I wtedy wiadomo, że chodzi o gaz, a nie o benzynę. So natural gas, which we get from underground. Nowadays we also have shale gas, to jest tak zwany gaz łupkowy. Again, it is extracted from the ground, from different geological structures. It's a different process, quite complicated and quite environmentally unfriendly. So the advantages of natural gas. It's relatively clean energy, relatively compared to, for example, burning coal or oil, because when you burn gas, you don't really create a lot of pollution. There is some, carbon dioxide, of course, but still it's much better than burning coal. So as I said, it causes little air pollution. For example, that's why we use it at home, yes, because you cook on it and you don't really get any smoke from it. It's easy to control. The energy generation from gas is easy to control because you control the process. Yes? So you can decide how much energy you will produce. Disadvantages, again, just like with oil, it's expensive, difficult to get. It is non-renewable, so we are going to use it up in the future. And shale gas extraction, czyli wydobywanie gazu łupkowego, can cause pollution. It is, as I said, it's a complicated process. It involves some chemicals. It's not very healthy for the environment. And the last one, nuclear energy, a controversial type of energy generation. There are some countries which are using it. There are some countries which are not using it. Some are just beginning to use it, like in Poland we are still planning to build a nuclear power plant. In other countries, like in Germany, they are just closing down nuclear power plants. So there are mixed feelings around the world about this source of energy. So the place where you create nuclear energy is called nuclear power plant. Power plant to elektrownia, nuclear power plant, elektrownia atomowa, and of course the energy is created in the process of nuclear fusion. Using some radioactive materials as raw materials. But it doesn't involve any burning of any fossil fuels. Yes, it's we could say, physical reaction. So what are the advantages of nuclear energy? First of all, it's relatively clean energy because you don't burn anything, so you don't cause much pollution to the air, to the water, really. It is quite easy to control the energy output. Energy output means energy production. Yes, you can control this process, so it's basically controllable. It doesn't require fossil fuels. It requires, of course, radioactive materials, but not so much as fossil fuels. What are the disadvantages? Well, the disadvantages, it requires extremely high investment. To build a nuclear power plant requires billions of, zloty dollars or whatever. It's extremely expensive to build. That's why in Poland we've been talking about building a nuclear power plant for, I don't know, like 40 years. And we still haven't even started building it. Yes, because it's such a huge investment, such a huge project. Again, it can be potentially dangerous. You have heard about Chernobyl, the nuclear power plant disaster. You have heard about Fukushima. So it doesn't happen very often. But when it happens, well, it can have some serious consequences, long-lasting consequences. There is radioactive contamination, czyli skażenie radioaktywne, and it can stay for a long time, like hundreds or even thousands of years. So it's extremely difficult to remove the effects of nuclear disaster. Another disadvantage is that we produce radioactive waste. The material that we use to produce energy, after sometimes it is no longer powerful enough and you have to remove it, but because it's still radioactive, you have to store it in special places, special conditions for a long time. It costs a lot of money, it's potentially risky. All right, so what is the conclusion of our lesson today? The conclusion is that we have to find ways to create energy in a healthy, environmentally and cheap way, because fossil fuels are going to run out sometime in the future. And another conclusion is that energy, because it is so hard to generate, we should try to conserve energy, to save energy. So how can we do this? Well, we should try to use energy efficient lighting, yes, which uses less energy. Energy efficient, czyli energooszczędne oświetlenie. We should switch off lights and appliances when you don't need them. Yes, so try to switch off lights which you are not using at the moment. Avoid using cars if you don't have to. People are crazy about cars. We use them just too much, so you should start using them. You should try not using them when you don't really need them and use public transport instead, or alternative means of transport which don't use or don't need any external energy, just the power of your muscles, like the bicycle or just walking. Don't overheat flats and houses. Sometimes when you enter a flat, when you enter a house, the temperature inside is like 26, 28 degrees, like on a summer day. We don't really need that. Yes, it takes a lot of energy to heat your house, but you don't really need such high temperature. So it's enough, just put on some warm clothes and you can lower the temperature by a few degrees in your house. Install solar panels. This is what people are already doing, and they are doing it for a reason. It makes sense, it saves the environment, and also it saves money in the long term. So I think that's all I wanted to say about energy today. Thank you very much and see you during our next lesson. Goodbye.
Co prawda było pytanie od naszych widzów, ale odpowiedź na nie w kolejnej lekcji za dosłownie kilka chwil.
No to świetnie.